All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Steve and Terry Zinn, for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in honor of their grandson, Matan Shmuel Aaron. May he grow in Meretz Hashem to be an incredible Ben Torah, Ameh Ve'esim Shanim Tovos. Our Day of Learning sponsors, Ilan and Elise Roth, for a full shlema for Nechama Bas Fruma Riva. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah sheet together with Kol Cholei Yisrael will have a complete and enduring refuah. Also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Mem Gimel 43, a really incredible daf ahead of us today. We are picking up on Mem Beis Amud Beis 42b, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem 17 lines up from the bottom. So as we actually read this line yesterday, Amar Yitzchak, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yavou b'nei ha-neshuka, v'yiplu b'nei ha-devuka. So as remember again, we see that in the story of David and Goliath is this dramatic reunion between the sisters. Right? We read on Shavuos in the opening of Megillas Rus, the dramatic departure. Right? Remember again, Arpa goes away, Arpa goes back to Moab. Ultimately, Rus clings on to Naomi, and ultimately two sisters, Rus and Arpa, end up going their own way. But again, their grandsons meet again on the battlefield. David, the grandson of Rus, Goliath, the grandson of Arpa. Ultimately, the families being reunited, albeit in these tragic circumstances. So the Gemara goes right, because of the 4 tears that Arpa shed when she had to take leave of Naomi in the beginning of Sefer Rus, 4 great and valiant men descended from her. Shina Emar, Vatisa'ena Kalan Vatifkena Od. Uksiv, so that's the passage about the crying. Uksiv, Chetz Chaniso. So we'll say, so here the Navi is talking about the size of Goliath's spear. Just to give you like the sheer enormity of the man, the Navi describes in great detail the dimensions of his spear. So it says Chetz Chaniso, which literally means like the shaft of his spear. Vikarinan Eitz Chaniso. Rabbi Lazar Adayin Lo Higano Lechatzi Shvacho Shel Osa Rasha. A little bit of a play on words. Chetz is like Chatzi. The Navi can't even, only describes half of the great strength and valiance of this warrior. From here, from the fact that the Navi does not detail the full degree of Goliath's strength and valor, indicates to us that in general, it's not appropriate to speak about the redeeming qualities or the praise of the wicked. So don't say it at all. No, the Navi wants to go into some detail about the greatness of Goliath. Why? Because it's through the greatness or the strength of Goliath that you come to see the valor of David. That David was willing to step forward, and David was willing to go ahead and engage in this battle, even though he was clearly outsized by this valiant warrior, yet again, he was willing to engage. I will say, you begin to see this theme, right? We saw it by Nachshon ben Aminadav, now we see it by David HaMelech, that one of the qualities which makes great people great is a willingness to put themselves on the line to accomplish a particularly needed task, even if it's not initially clear how that task is going to be accomplished. So Nachshon says we have to go, we have to go into Eretz Yisrael. What's the plan? I don't know what the plan is, but what I do know is we need to get this done, right? Similar idea. You have David HaMelech understanding that I have to fight Goliath. How am I going to fight Goliath? What am I going to do to fight Goliath? That I don't know. But all I know is that somehow, some way, this initiative has to get done. Incredible yisod. The Gemara goes weiter. So again, the Mishnah is talking about the Mishnah contrasting. Ultimately, again, different types of warriors. So for example, Ammon came with Shovach. Ksiv Shovach, Ksiv Shofach. Calls him Shovach, but it also calls Shofach. So which name is it? Rabbi Shmuel Chadamar Shofach Shmo. One says no, his name was Shofach. So why did it call him Shovach? Sha'asui Kishovach. He was built like a dovecote. Literally, again, he was built like a dovecote. The Chad Amar Shovach Shmo. His name was Shovach. V'lama nikra Shmo Shofach. So why was his name called Shofach? Shekalara also Shofach lefanav kikiton. Because ultimately, again, Shovach, this warrior of Ammon, was so strong that literally just seeing him made you scared. And how did that fear manifest itself? You would lose control of your bowels, right? You would literally just go ahead and empty yourself. And literally the waste would just pour out. Person would lose control of their bowels out of fear. So the Gemara goes weiter. Now we're switching gears a little bit. Rashi points out over here, Ashpaso kekever pasuach literally means his garbage heap was like an open grave. So Rashi writes over here, we're no longer talking about shofach or Goliath, rather, this is talking about the soldiers of Nebuchadnezzar. Rashi says, fine, soldiers of Nebuchadnezzar. To which the Gemara says, Kulam Giborim. They were all strong. Rabbi Shmuel, so what does it mean? Say, Ashpaso kekever pasuach. What does that mean? The garbage heap was like an open grave. What does this mean? Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Asi, Chadamar. One says the soldiers of Nebuchadnezzar were so strong that with one arrow, they felled heaps and heaps of bodies. Maybe say, that's only the special forces soldiers. They all had this skill. Others say, it's interesting, that when the soldiers of Nebuchadnezzar leave themselves, they would go ahead and leave behind piles and piles of excrement. Okay, it's not a usual type of praise, but the Gemara says, V'shema Tomar, listen to this, V'shema Tomar mipnei shecholi me'ayim heim. I says, well, maybe they just have like some type of stomach issue. In other words, why is this representative of some type of gvura? Talmud Omar, kulam giborim. Ultimately, they were strong. So I'll say the idea seems to be they were strong, big people, ingested a lot of food in order to be able to keep up their strength, and therefore, again, excreted a tremendous amount as well. Amra Mari, so I'll say just a side note, Shmami na Haiman din Nafish Zivle Choli Me'ayim. What do you see from here? That in general, if a person does move their bowels often, if a person does excrete very often, that is usually a sign of some type of stomach issue. To which the Gemara says, "Lamai nafkamina." So what does it matter? Litrach benafshe. So we'll say, what is it? Litrach benafshe. Rashi says, "Levakish lo refuos terem yichbad choli alav." It means ultimately seek out a remedy. Seek out a remedy. So in other words, if a person is constantly relieving themselves, it might be indicative that something is going on with their stomach or whatever, some other part of the body, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, litrach l'nafshe. Go find the remedy. I will say, by the way, there's an incredible Musar Haskell in that phrase. Listen to what the Gemara is saying. Person excretes a lot. It's a sign of choli. So the Gemara says, okay, and therefore what? And therefore what? And the answer is, go fix it. Go fix it. See, I will say, when a person sees that they have a problem in life, very often we encounter problems, whether it's situational problems, personalistic problems, familial problems, and more often than not, unfortunately, what do we do with our problems? What do we do with them? We ignore them. The Gemara says, what's the proper approach for a yid when you encounter a life problem? Litrach benafshe. Litrach benafshe. Do something. Do something. The something doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be able to fix the problem. The something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to find the tshuva for the kasha, the answer to the question. But litrach, I will say, remember again, what is the lashon litrach benafshe? Literally mean litrach, tircha. Put in the effort to find something to better yourself. Put in the effort to do something to somehow advance your personalistic agenda. It's such a simple phrase. The Gemara says, "My nafkamina." So you have a problem, so what? It's not so what. You have a problem, do something to try to fix it. Incredible. Daiga belev ish. So we'll say the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Mishlei. Daiga belev ish yashchena. So I'll say, what does this mean? Literally translated, if there's worry in the heart of a person, yashchena. So what does yashchena mean? Rabbi Asi, Chad Amar yashchena midaito, or yishachena midaito. One opinion says, ultimately, it means remove it from your mind. Rashi says, yisachena midaito. Yisachena midaito, remove it. The Chad Amar yasichena la'acherim. Others say what it means is, talk it out with others. Talk it out. Both say, again, such a fantastic idea. There's something on your mind. So what should you do with it? What should you do with the things that are weighing on your mind? So two opinions. One opinion says, put it out of your mind. You take it out of your mind, or or talk about it with others. It will say, who's right? Who's right? Who's right? They're both right. Sometimes in life you have different types of issues. There are certain things, and again, this is the connection to the previous Gemara as well. I have a problem. Daiga b'levish is something on my mind. Do something about it. Litrach b'nafshe. What should I do? Well, it depends on the problem. Some things, this is an incredible yesod. Some things have an answer, right? Some things have a pitaron, they have a solution. So, but sometimes I can't figure it out on my own. So if you can't figure it out on your own, what do you do? Go ahead, talk it out with someone else. Talk it out. Figure out a solution. Rabbi said there are other things, there are other problems in life for which there is no current solution. What do you do with those problems? What do you do with those problems? Rabbi said, what do you do with them? Sometimes you just have to compartmentalize them, move them to the back of your mind, and move on with your life. That's yasichena midaito. That's ultimately, again, remove it from your mind. Rabbi say such an incredible yesod. So if you bring this whole last unit together, it's a dramatic Musar Haskell. What's the dramatic, right? A person has a problem. Choli. So the Gemara says, "Ma'inaf kamina litrach b'nafshe." You have problems in life, challenges in life. Do something about it. Do something about it. What should you do about it? So daiga b'levish hishachena. So what should you do about it? It depends on the problem. Some things which have a solution, if you can't figure out the solution on your own, speak about it with others. Speak about it with others. Other things where you can't find a solution to your problems, we'll say sometimes in life, it doesn't mean burying your problems, but sometimes you just have to kind of push things from the frontal lobe to the back, right? Not even necessarily to the subconscious, but sometimes you just have to push things out of your primary consciousness. Right now, I can't do anything about this situation. So I have to stop worrying about it. I have to stop thinking about it. I have to stop obsessing over it. I have to move it to the side because I still have a lot to accomplish in life. Incredible. Weiter. V'i came. So v'chol kach lama. So the Gemara says, remember, we'll say, why is it that the Mashuach Milchama has to get into a whole discussion about, remember again, just to kind of reorient ourselves, what are you talking about over here? Right? And we're speaking about in the Mishnah the whole speech that the Mashuach Milchama would give to the soldiers before they went out to war. So remember, part of the speech was, all the nations of the world come with their warriors. And who do you come with? You come with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ultimately, again, who leads you out to battle. So it says, V'chol kach lama, mipnei shashem v'chol kinuyav top of mem gimel munachin ba'aron. Because we'll say, remember again, when they went out to war, they went out with an aron, with an ark. Now we'll say, to be clear, we're going to discuss this. Which ark did they go out to war with? Not the aron that sat in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. There was another aron. Now, so you say, where is the other aron from? So the Mefarshim bring down, when Moshe Rabbeinu brought down the luchos from Har Sinai, the second set of luchos, right? Second set of luchos from Har Sinai. But remember again, that's when they began construction on the Mishkan. So where did they put the luchos? From the time that Moshe Rabbeinu brought them down until the time that the Mishkan was completed. Like where'd you put them? Right on the bookshelf. Where'd you put them? So the Mefarshim answer, they had an ark. They had some type of aron. So what did they do with that aron? That aron went out to war with the Jewish army. So therefore, again, when the Mashuach Milchama says that ultimately Hashem Elokeichem Alechi Machem, so that means the ark with all of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu inside of it was going out to war. V'chinu Omer Vayishlach Osa Moshe Elef Lamata L'Tzav Osam Es Pinchas Osam. So the Gemara breaks down the pasuk. Who's Osam? Elu Sanhedrin. Pinchas Ze Mashuach Milchama. Uklei Kodesh Ze Aron V'Luchos Shebo. Shebo. So we'll say, so we're going to discuss this exactly. What does it mean that the luchos, what was in this aron that they took out to battle? We're going to discuss this as well. Uklei Kodesh, the holy utensils, Ze Aron V'Luchos Shebo. Fine. V'chatzotzros Hatrua. The trumpets, Elu HaShofros. This refers to the Shofros. So Tana, Lo Lechinam Halach Pinchas L'Milchama, Ali Pared Din Avimo. So we'll say, we're pausing here for just a moment to speak about a specific situation. Pinchas, right? So it's not for nothing that Pinchas went out to war. Why did Pinchas go to war? Ali Pared Din Avimo. Pinchas went out to war to avenge his maternal grandfather. Who was his maternal grandfather? Shneimar. Va'midyanim machru osal Mitzrayim. Also remember again, Pinchas went out to war against the Midyanim. This is after Pinchas kills Zimri and Cosby. He goes out to war with the Jewish army against Midyan. So why was this Pinchas's fight? Pinchas goes out to war against Midyan in order to avenge his maternal grandfather. Who was his maternal grandfather? Yosef. What problem did Yosef have with the Midyanim? The Midyanim sold Yosef. Well, the brothers sold Yosef to the Midyanim, and the Midyanim ultimately sold Yosef to the Mitzrim. Remember the Pinchas Yosef, Azi? Is that true that Pinchas is descendant of Yosef? V'haksiv ve'elazar ben Aaron lakach bo mibnos Putia lo liisha. But the pasuk says that Elazar ben Aaron took from the daughters of Putiel. Right? Remember again, Pinchas is the son of Elazar. So it says that Elazar married from the daughters of Putiel. Who's Putiel? My love, the Asim Yisro. Shepitem agalim la'avodos kochavim. They will say, is this not ultimately, isn't Putiel Yisro? So why is Putiel called Yisro? Because Yisro fattened calves for avodos kochavim. So it's interesting. So that was his name, Putiel. That's one of the descriptive names that he was known by. So you see from here that Pinchas is not descendant from Yosef. Pinchas is descendant from Yisro. To which the Gemara says, Lo, mi Yosef shepit peit biyitzro. No, what it means is Putiel is actually Yosef. Putiel is Yosef. Why does it call Yosef Putiel? Shepit peit biyitzro. Literally, Rashi says, Zilzel v'kavash. He was able to degrade and ultimately capture his Yetzer Hara. Right? Remember again, I said, referencing back to the story of Yosef and Eshes Potiphar, where in a moment of incredible desire, Yosef was able to go ahead and rein in his Yetzer Hara. But the Shvatim were going ahead and degrading Pinchas, and they were saying, after Pinchas went ahead and killed Zimri, who was a Nasi, was a tribal prince. So the Shvatim said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You who grandfather literally worshipped fattened calves." Ultimately, to have Avodah Zarah, you're going to come. You have the chutzpah to come along and to go ahead and kill a prince of Klal Yisrael. So, also see the point. Leaving that entire exchange on the side, the point over here is you see that Pinchas is not a descendant of Yosef. Pinchas is a descendant of Yisro. Yosef. Rather, what you have to say is as follows: either two possibilities. Either his maternal grandfather was from Yosef. Then ultimately his maternal grandmother was from Yisro. Or if his maternal grandmother was from Yosef, his maternal grandfather was from Yisro. In other words, the point the Gemara is making is he was descendant of both. He was descendant of both of Yisro and of Yosef. I will say, we learn this in the fact that the name Putiel is written in the longer form with the Yud. Could have been written without the Yud. The fact that it's ultimately written Putiel with the Yud indicates that it's teaching us two things. Two people, right? Putiel means two things. Shepitem agalim la'avodos kochavim. Fattened calves for Avodah Zarah. That's reference to the fact that Pinchas descended from Yisro. Second possibility of the Yud, Shepit Peit Biyitzro. He's someone who went ahead and conquered his Yetzer Hara. That's a reference to Yosef. Incredible. Yosef Viter, Mishnah. V'dibra Shotrim ala Am Leimor. So what does this say now? We get into, remember we saw in yesterday's daf, there are two speeches that were given, right? Two drashas. Drasha number one was given where? It was given where? At the border of Eretz Yisrael, right as soon as they left. Drasha number two, at the front of the line, right, front lines, right when they're about to go out to battle. So what does it say now? The officer spoke to the nation and they said, Mia ish asher bana bayis chadash v'lo chanacho yelech v'yashav lebeso. Who is the person? Well, see, now we're going to get into the list of exemptions. Who is the person who built a home and did not dedicate it? Literally did not dedicate it. What it means is did not live in it. Ultimately, go back home. Next. So we'll say, what kind of house? This is whether you built a house for straw, beis habakar, a stable, beis ha'etzim, wood storage, beis ha'otzros, roast, a silo, or whether you bought it, or whether you built it, whether you purchased it, whether you inherited it, or they got it at a gift. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, what we see is, it sounds like we're going to talk about this more in the Gemara, but the home need not be a primary domicile. But rather what we're going to see is, as long as the home could serve as a technical domicile, ultimately, again, you could return from war because of it. Next, Who is the person ultimately, again, who planted a vineyard and did not yet get to partake of it? So we'll say, what does this mean? Is whether you actually planted a vineyard, or you planted 5 fruit trees, even of 5 different species. So whether you planted something, whether you layered something, or whether you grafted something, whether you bought it, or you inherited it, or you got it as a gift. Got it as a gift. Okay, well, again, we're going to define all these different categories in the Gemara. Next, who is the man who betrothed the woman but did not yet live with her? Go home. This is whether you did erusin with a basula, or if you did erusin with an almana, afilu shomeres yavam. Interesting. Let's say even if it's a situation of shomeres yavam. Remember again, what's that case? Right? Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven dies. Shimon now is a surviving brother. So now Rachel is a shomeres yavam to Shimon. So even that type of situation, even we'll say, let's say again, Shimon hears that Reuven died in battle, and now again, Shimon himself is at the front. Ultimately, I will say, for all of these circumstances, you go back for more. Go back for more. So the Gemara says, the kol elu ve'elu. We'll say first of the intermediate wide lines. Kol elu ve'elu shomim divrei kohen mi'archa emachama. The chosrin o misapkin mayim umozu v'taknes hadrachim. I will say, now here's what's fascinating. So 3 categories. We're familiar with this, right? Someone built a home, didn't live in it. Someone went and planted a vineyard, didn't partake of it. Someone married a woman, didn't live with her. 3 exemptions, right? So the shotr. We'll say, as we said in yesterday's daf. What's the dramatic idea? And I will say, it's not the pshat that like you're traveling with the army, you're like, oh, you know what, I just realized I betrothed her and I didn't live with her, right? Or I built a house, I didn't live with it. Obviously, this is not like panim chadashos ba'olakan. So remember, we saw yesterday, what's the pshat? The Jewish army goes out to war. Every single Jew goes. You go with your brothers. You go with your people. Okay, not everybody goes to fight, but you go. You go. You give chizik to the people who's going along. Again, they will say, there's a chizik for Klal Yisrael when a massive army goes ahead and leaves and goes out to battle. So you go. But now, you hear about one of these exemptions, you go back home. What does it mean to be exempted? What it means to be exempted is you are exempted from fighting, but you are not exempted from supporting the war effort, right? So any of these guys, they go back and essentially they become part of the supply chain, right? They become part ultimately again of the, what's the word? So support, so the support crew, the support for the war. And what do? They go ahead and what happens? So they supply food for the troops, water for the troops, and ultimately make sure that the roads are fit for passage. Okay. So we'll say, now again, there are certain things that if you built, or are there certain things which you won't get an exemption for. For example, we'll say like if you build ultimately like a gatehouse, mir pasas, you build a portico. So essentially, like if you ordered a shed from Home Depot, right, and you went ahead, right, and you put that up in your backyard, right, that is not getting you out of war. That's not getting you out of war. Or a person, remember again, the example of planting, remember the Torah's example is who planted a vineyard and did not yet take part of the fruit. So we extended the definition of vineyard, that it doesn't mean vineyard. It could even mean 5 fruit trees. What if you only planted 4 fruit trees, or 5 barren trees? We'll say again, ultimately this would not be a reason, this would not be a license, not be a license to not go out to war, or not be a license to return from war. Next, hamaxres grushaso. Well, so what about in the marriage category? If you remarry your divorcee, right? Reuben is married to Rachel, he divorces Rachel. Now he does erusin with Rachel again. He hears the announcement of the Kohen. He's ready to go back. No, not you. You don't go back. Machzir grushaso, you don't go back. Or Amar the Kohen Gadol, grusha v'chalutz the Kohen Hedyot, mamzeres unesina li Yisrael, bas Yisrael mamzer unesin lo hayachozo. Or I will say the other type of marriage you don't go back for is an illegal marriage. Right? Remember again, I will say we don't pass like Rabbi Akiva, and therefore we paskin kiddushin tovsim b'chayvei lavin. Right? Rabbi Akiva is the opinion who says that in kiddushin tovsim b'chayvei lavin, even if a marriage is only punishable by a lav, Rabbi Akiva holds that the marriage does not take effect. We don't paskin that way, but the marriage does take effect, even if it's illegal. But lamaisa, you do not go back for war from that type of marriage. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, af habone bayis al mechono lo hayachozer. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, say, listen to this. What happens if a person had a house? They knocked down their current house and they're rebuilding the house. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't go back for that either. You don't go back for that either, right? Right? Rabbi Eliezer Omer afhabone bayis leveinim b'sharon lo hayu chozer. So I'll say so too. If you went ahead and you built a home out of bricks in the Sharon region area. So we'll say top Rashi. The Rashi's on both sides of this top. There's the left-hand column, top left-hand column. Leveinim makom Sharon makom hu sheshmo Sharon. There's a place. There's a region area that is the Sharon region. And the earth is very muddy, and therefore again you can't really make proper bricks. And we'll say ultimately again, this would not be a permanent structure. You couldn't really build an enduring structure. We'll say they had to go ahead and rebuild their homes once every 3.5 years, or 2 times in 7 years, that the Gemara says. So such a temporary structure would not be a reason to go ahead and go. And we'll say, we're going to see, there's obviously a svara for all of this, right? Why are we sending soldiers home from war? Why are we sending soldiers home from war? Because for a soldier to be effective, he has to have singular focus. He cannot be focused on anything other than winning the battle and taking care of the guy next to him. That's all. That's all. He can't be worried about his wife. He can't be worried about his house. He can't be worried about his field. And therefore, again, but we understand some people are preoccupied. If you are preoccupied with something that is going to distract you, we don't want you on the battlefield. We love you. Go back and help, but we don't want you on the battlefield. We'll say, do you understand the incredible Moshe skill? If you want to be successful in the battles of life, one must have single-mindedness. One must be determined. One must have tunnel vision. One must be able to shut everything out. More often than not, the reason we don't accomplish the things we want to accomplish in life is not because we don't care, and it's not because we're not trying hard enough. It's not because we're not willing to put in effort. It's because we lack focus. Because we lack focus. I have diffused attentiveness, right? I'm paying attention to a million things at once. When you pay attention to a million things at once, you get almost nothing done in the correct way, right? We're all diffused for a variety of different reasons, right? But Lamaisa will say, isn't that incredible? So Mashuach Milchama says, if we don't have your full attention, you will not be successful in this battle. We love you. We thank you for showing up. Now go home. And what's true on the actual battlefield of war is just as true on the battlefield of everyday life. You want to be successful at something, whether it's your learning of the daf, or whether it's your profession, or whether it's your family time, single-minded focus, single-minded determination, the ability to block everything else out when you're doing the task at hand. That's what creates success. The Gemara goes weiter. We'll say now there's a whole other group. So let's say, it's a whole other group. Group number 1 are the soldiers who go to battle. Group number 2, soldiers who are exempted from battle, go back home and support the war efforts. And now there's a third group. We'll say this third group does not show up for duty. Right? This third group, when the army gathers, don't even leave their homes. Who are they? Bana bayis v'chancho. This is a guy who built a home, and he's living within his home. Right? He built a home, he's living in it, but he's not yet living in it a full year. Right? So the Gemara says, or not a keren v'chillo, or a person planted a vineyard, and he's partaking of the fruit in the first year that it's permitted to do so. Right? He's in the first year. No se sarusaso. Ultimately, again, man got married, and he's during Shana Rishona, in his first year marriage. Hakonis es yivimto, or a man married is yivama shneimar, v'naki yeh lebeso shana achos. Pasuk says he shall be to his home naki, freed from all responsibilities for a full year. Lebeso, zebeso. Beso refers to one who built a home and is living in it. Yihia, zekarmo, that refers to his vineyard. V'simachas ishto, zu ishto, that refers to his wife. Asher lakach, lahavi esivimto, comes to include ultimately Yivam. So I will say this is incredible. So in this third category, these are the people who are in Shana Rishona. First year of living in a new home, first year, of partaking of the vineyard, first year of being married. These individuals, I will say, when the call-up comes, they don't even have to leave. They don't have to leave. They remain exactly where they are, doing what they're doing. Furthermore, in Mesapkin Mayim Umazon ve'Emetaknes Hadrach. I will say not only that, but they are not obligated to support the war effort at home. Now we'll say we're going to discuss this because this is like why. Why? It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, especially the Shana Rishon of marriage. It's fantastic. We'll discuss the svara and the hashkafa behind each of these categories. Let's go back to Turn Rabbanon. V'dibra Shotrim. Pasuk says the Shotrim will speak. Yochel Dvarim Shalatzman. So we'll say. So you might have thought the Shotrim kind of get up and just give their own pep talk. Kishu Omer ve'asifu Shotrim Hari Dvarim Shalatzman. So we'll say there is a space, right? There is time for the Shotrim, who essentially are the commanders of the army, to give their own divrei chizuk to the troops. Hasidim Gemara says, "Ma'ani mekayim v'dibra shotrim, but divrei meshuach milchama kasam medaber." But when the pasuk says v'dibra shotrim, what they're actually conveying are the words of the Mashuach Milchama. The Mashuach Milchama gives a message. He can't, right now everybody could hear him. So he gives it over to the Shotrim convey it to the people. Ha-Ketzad, so we'll say, how does this work? Kohen Medaber, so the Kohen Mashuach Milchama, he gives the message. The Shoter Mashmiya, kind of like a Turkman, I will say. Right? So the Mashuach Milchama, he gives the drasha, and then the Shotrim, their job is to disseminate. Tani Chad, so we'll say, here's the problem. Tani Chada, Kohen Medaber, Shoter Mashmiya. So we'll say, so one place it says, the Kohen speaks, and the Shoter spreads the word of the Kohen. Tanya Idach, another place it says, Kohen Medaber, Kohen Mashmiya. The Kohen speaks, and the Kohen says it over to the people. The Tanya Idach, Shoter Medaber, Shoter Mashmiya. And third place says, I'll say what? The Shoter speaks, and the Shoter conveys it over to the people. So who's speaking and who's conveying? Rabbi Shmuel said it's not a problem. We'll say there are different speaking parts in preparing the army for war. Mivenigash ad v'dibru, from the section of the Torah v'nigash until v'dibru, kohen medaber v'kohen mashmiya. The Kohen speaks, and the Kohen is the only one speaking. So the Gemara says, Mividabru ad. For that next section, the Kohen speaks, but the Shoter conveys it over. We'll say the last part, Shoter speaks, and the Shoter conveys the message to the people. So we'll say, so essentially, again, there are three different speaking parts, so to speak, in preparing the army for war. Two of them are done by the Kohen Mashuach Milchama, one of them by the Shotrim. Incredible. We'll say, let's analyze this a little bit. Who is the man who built a home? Who built a new home? So Turn Rabbanon, Asher Bana, Ainli Ela Bana. So we'll say, so when you look at the passage in the Torah says, who is the man who built a new home, but has not yet lived in it? So we'll say, built sounds like what? Bana means what? You build it. So the Gemara says, Lakach, the Yarash, V'nitla Matanaminai. How do you know that it even applies to a home that he purchased, a home that he inherited, or a home that he was gifted? Talmud Lomar, Mia Ish Asher Bana Bayis. So we'll say, the pasuk didn't have to say ish. It could have just said mi asher bana bayis. The fact that it added in the word ish ultimately again indicates that it's referring even to other situations other than actual building. Look at Rashi. Mi ish ribuyahu t'matzil michtav mi asher bana mi asher bana. Rashi will say on the left hand side of our timelines up from the bottom. Miloksiv asher bana bayis darash bay bana. Mikol makom. Shabbos says, so the idea over here is the extra ish teaches me it's not just someone who built a home, but rather it's someone who has a brand new home in which he has not yet lived. So whether you built it, whether you bought it, whether you inherited it, or you gifted it, fine. Emi alabayis. Minayin rabos beis hateven, beis habakar, beis heiz beis. I was supposed to say, so bayis, bepashtos means what? Primary domicile. So how do I know that this exemption applies not just to a primary domicile, but to other important structures as well, like a house for storing straw, a house for your cattle, a house for your wood, and a house ultimately again for your otsar? A silo, a gathering place, which often means olives. Right? The Gemara says, Asher bana mikol makom. Because what's the Torah use lashon of Asher bana? We look at Asher bana kind of on its own, that you built. So it doesn't have to just refer to a primary domicile, but rather it could refer ultimately again to any structure. So so maybe it even refers to even about say non-domicile like structures, like for example a gatehouse, right, or a portico. So the Gemara says Talmud Lomar bayis. Therefore, no, the Torah says bayis. It has to have the tzur, the structure of a home. Ma bayis haray ledira. So we'll say, by the way, that's going to be the answer. You'll ask yourself, so I don't understand why you are allowed to return from war for a house of straw, right? A house for your cattle, a house for your wood, and a house, because we'll say, technically speaking, the way those were constructed is they could be used as a domicile, right? So contrast that with a gatehouse or a guardhouse that cannot be used as a domicile. That's the chap. Even though, again, I'm not using it as a domicile, but because it is domicile worthy, therefore, halacha l'maisa, you could go back for more from it. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, good. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer bayis kamashma'o. He holds ultimately, again, bayis means exactly what it sounds like, right? A home. V'lo chanach, v'lo chancho. So let's listen to this. So ultimately, again, you did not go ahead and literally inaugurate or consecrate it. Prat legazlan. So let's say this is very interesting. So remember, the pasuk says v'lo chancho. You did not consecrate it or inaugurate it for yourself. Rabbi say, why doesn't it just say v'lo chanach? You write it wasn't used. Why did it say v'lo chancho in the possessive? Prat legazlan. This is incredible. I say, listen to this. Imagine for a moment the guy goes out to war, right? He's listening to the instructions, and the Kohen says, okay, who is the person who has a new house that he has not yet lived in? And Reuven's thinking to himself, you know what? I just stole this house from Shimon, and I realized I haven't lived in it yet. I haven't lived in it yet. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, what Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, v'lo chanacho means you have not inaugurated, consecrated, or utilized something that is what? Something that is what? Something that's yours. Prat legazlan comes to exclude someone who has stolen something. You can't go back from war for that. You'll say to yourself, 1 second, if the guy is a thief, why would you think that he would be heeding the word of the Kohen? Why do you think we're heeding the word of the Kohen? So I'll say, so remember, you're saying this all the time. We're all a shtickle hypocritical, right? There are things in my Yiddishkeit that I do very well, and things that I flagrantly violate. It's the nature of the human condition to live with some degree of hypocrisy. In any given moment, I'm doing great things in certain areas in life, and I'm absolutely in the wrong in other areas. And that's okay. That's what it means to be a person. Only the Ribono Shel Olam is thoroughly genuine, and only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is thoroughly perfect. In any given moment, I am in a state of inequilibrium. Is that the right word? Inequilibrium? Good, in equilibrium, it is now, right? In equilibrium, right? So Lamaisi, it's so incredibly important. I could be doing mitzvahs in certain areas and doing terrible averos. You could have a guy who's willing to go out to war. He wants to be good with the instructions of the Kohen, but he stole a house. It's not a contradiction, or I should say it is a contradiction, but it's a contradiction that all of us live with. All of us live with. So the Gemara goes weiter. So Leima Abdul Rabbi Yosef Galilei. Suppose we're going to see this later on. This opinion does not shtim with Rabbi Yosef Galilei. Why? Rabbi Yosef Galilei ha'amar v'rach halevav. So we're going to see later on that after the Kohen goes through all of the exemptions, another exemption is someone who is soft of heart. We're going to see it's a machlokes. What does it mean to be soft of heart? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef Galilei says, Zeh misyare amud beis me'avero shebiyado. So I'll say, so ultimately, again, this is incredible. So it's incredible. Rabbi Yosef Galilei says, what does it mean soft of heart? Soft of heart means someone who is afraid of his averos. I'm in battle, right? Or I'm about to go out to battle, right? The Kohen says, if you're soft of heart, afraid, don't come out to battle. What does it mean to be afraid? Rabbi Yosef Galilei says, of my averos. I know that I have averos that I've done, and I'm really worried that I do not have the requisite zechuyos to be able to be successful in battle. So I will say, according to Rabbi Yosef Galilei, the guy who stole the house should be able to go back from battle, not just because he has a house that he didn't live in. Rather, why should he be able to go back? Why? He's a thief. And if you know that you have outstanding averos, Rabbi Yosef Galilei says, don't go out to battle. Don't go out to battle. I will say, we're going to talk about, you think to yourself, that must have been one small army. Right? One small army. We'll talk about it. The Gemara says as follows. Afilu tim Rabbi Yosef Galilei, ki gon da'avad tshuva v'yav dameh. I will say, what's the case? This is incredible. What's the case? The case is where Reuven, who's standing on the battlefront, right? Reuven stole the house from Shimon. So now what happens? He hears the Kohen says, whoever has a house and didn't live in it for a year should go back. So Reuven's thinking, that's me. Rabbi Yosef Galilei says, so now the Gemara says, Chanacho, it has to be your house. It has to be your house. You don't go back for a stolen house. The Gemara says, but what about his Averos? He has an outstanding Avera. That's also a reason to go back. Tush Gemara says, no, he doesn't have an outstanding Avera. Why? Because what did he do? He did Shuvah and he paid for the house. Right? So Reuven felt that. He did Shuvah. He acknowledged to Shimon, I stole your house. Right? Can I buy it from you? Shimon says yes, and he gave him the money. Well, if that's the case, if that's the case, then Lamaisa, what happened now? Reuven, as he stands at the front of the battle, stands at the battle line, he's what? He is a proper purchaser. And if he's a proper purchaser and he hasn't yet lived there, then what? He should be able to go. He should be able to go back from war. To which the Gemara says, listen to this. Kevan de meikara b'toras kazela asli lo. Since Rossi, how did he get that home? How did Reuven get that home? He got the home through theft. So the Gemara is saying is the exemption, the technical exemption of going back for a home that you did not yet live in, is a home that came into your possession through legal means. The fact that this home initially came into Reuven's possession through illegal means, i.e. theft, even though he remedied the theft, right, and he paid for the home, so l'maisa, again, you don't go back for such a home. I will say it's a technicality. But I will say, what a dramatic Musar Haskell. There are some things in life which turn out fine in the end, right? The result is fine. But the problem is when parts of the process are flawed, those flaws don't go away even if the end turns out as it should. And I will say, you see this kind of all the time in interpersonal relationships, right? Imagine in a marriage for a moment. This is Maisim B'chol Yom. Well, for some of us, it's Maisim B'chol Yom. Let's say, so you get into an argument with your spouse. And let's say it's one of those rare moments where you are wrong. You're wrong. Mamish, you're wrong. So, right? I know, crazy, right? So what do you do? You muster up the courage. You own it. You apologize, right? And you're back on track. Except there's only one little problem. What's the one little problem, right? The avla, the mistake is still there, right? So now, like the process is good. By the time we got to the end, we finished, right? And the truth is, I'm not talking about one of those apologies that you have to give, the apology that says, I'm sorry if I did something that hurt you, right? I'm sorry if what? Did you or didn't you, right? I'm sorry if I did something that you or someone you know may have perceived as a slight to your dignity, right? Better off not saying anything, right? Imagine it's actually one of those genuine apologies where I really messed up. I'm really sorry. It was a moment of weakness. It was poor judgment. I love you very much. I'm so sorry. Please accept my apology. Genuine. And the apology is genuinely accepted. Often in relationships, the hurt still hovers. Because you can't forget, right? The affected party, the aggrieved party, often can't forget the wrong. I forgive, but I can't forget. That's the challenge in relationships. And we have to be so careful with our interactions. Because you could always apologize, and the apology could be accepted, and there is the ability absolutely to move on. But sometimes when a process begins in a flawed way, even if you're able to turn it around by the time it gets to its conclusion, the flaw remains. It's like a diamond, right? If you go ahead and you get a diamond and you put it in a setting, the diamond has a flaw. So what can you do? You go to a good jeweler. What does the jeweler do? The jeweler puts the flaw right by one of the prongs of the setting. So no one is ever going to know. No one's ever going to know, right? The color's not going to know. No one's ever going to know, right? Except you, the purchaser of the diamond, it's there. Right? It's always there. It's always going to be there. And a lot of times that's how relationships work as well. So the diamond is beautiful. You can build a beautiful relationship. It's gorgeous to look at. But Lamaisa, the flaw still exists. When things start out in a flawed fashion, even if by the end of the process we're good, the flaw hovers. You stole a house. Very good. You did shuvah. It's yours now. Legally, you're fine. But Lamaisa, again, it started out in the wrong way. And the problem with starting out in the wrong way is often that flaw does not go. It's such an incredible Musar Haskell for how we live and certainly how we create our relationships. Let's go back there. I do really have to go back there. Says the Gemara, Mea Isha Nata Kerem. Who is the person who planted a vineyard? Asher Nata, Ainli Ella Nata. I only know Mamish that the exemption is for a person who actually went ahead and planted a vineyard. So Lakach Yarash Vinit Lo Matanaminai. And how do I know that it even applies to someone who purchased, who inherited, or got it as a gift? Talmud Lomar. Ish asher nata kerem. So the Gemara will say once again, it's the same drasha. Ish is always extra over here. So from the extra ish, what we're constantly learning are these additional categories. Eli ala kerem. I don't know a vineyard. How do I know that it even applies to 5 different types of trees? Right, 5 different types of fruit trees. Even different species. Talmud Lomar asher nata. The Sefer says you plant. In other words, it doesn't have to be an actual vineyard, but rather it's at least 5 fruit trees. That creates a halachic vineyard as well. So maybe it even applies to 4 fruit trees, or for that matter, 5 barren trees. 5 non-fruit producing trees. So the Gemara says, Tamalomar, kerem. We'll say just like a kerem ultimately is something that is significant, so it has to be a minimum of 5 fruit-bearing trees, and it can't be any barren trees. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, kerem kimashmo. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov disagrees. He says kerem means kerem. Kerem means kerem, right? What is a vineyard? What do you go back from war for? A vineyard. A vineyard. Lo chilel v'lo chilelo. So we'll say, so remember again, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, it could have said lo chilel. Literally, again, you did not enjoy it. You did not enjoy it. No, right? You did not enjoy it. Why does it say v'lo chilelo possessive? Prat lemavrich ulemarkib. That comes to us. Rabbi say someone who layers or grafts. What we learned in the Mishnah. Echad hanotea ve'echad hamavrich ve'echad hamarkiv. But I will say that halacha we learned in the Mishnah that whether you plant or whether you layer or whether you graft, ultimately, again, that is a reason to go back from battle. So that contradicts what we just said before. It's not a contradiction. Kan bahar kavas iser, kan bahar kavas eter. Rabbi said this is fascinating. Remember again, Lamaisa, there are different forms of grafting. There is legal grafting and illegal grafting. What's an example of illegal grafting? Grafting 2 different species together. What's an example of legal grafting? Grafting the same species together. So if you did illegal grafting, you cannot go back from war for that. The same way that what? If you're in an illegal marriage, you cannot go back for from that. But if you did legal grafting, this is that legal grafting has the status of actual planting, and therefore you could go back to war from that. Incredible. We'll say, what's the case of legal grafting? What's the case? So ilema yalda biyalda. So we'll say, if you say we're talking about grafting a young sapling with another young sapling, so tefach debay mehader mishum yalda rishona. I would say I should be able to go back, forget about the grafting, I have a young sapling, right, which I have not yet partaken of. Rather, it has to be Ella Yalda Bizakena. Rather, I will say, what does it have to be? It has to be that you're grafting a young sapling with an older one. I have Yalda Shesivcha Bizakena, Batla Yalda Bizakena. But I will say, if you go ahead, but we learned that if you graft a young sapling, right, with an older one, ultimately, again, the young one is battle to the older one. Ve'im badin arla. And I will say, V'haraya, the new growth would not be subject to arla. So if that's the case, if you're grafting Yalda Bizakena, a young sapling with an older sapling, you shouldn't be able to come back from war for that, because Lamai said that would have the status of a mature tree already. Rabbi Yomi Olam Yalda B'Yalda. What's the case? The case ultimately is where you're grafting a young sapling onto a young sapling. Ukigon denata lahach kamaisa l'siyag u'lekoros. This is fascinating. I'll say, and we're talking about a case where the first tree that you planted was not planted for its fruit. Rather, it was planted to serve as a border, right? Either as a siyag, either like as a fence, like a property fence, or koros. So you're going to use it for wood later on. So therefore, again, it did not really have the status, ultimately, again, of a fruit tree. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi's on the right-hand side, almost right across a couple lines down. You had a breach in the fence of your field. And what happens? You originally planted this older tree, or this first tree, in order to go ahead and serve as a fence. Therefore, you're grafting the younger sapling onto it. And halacha l'maisa, the identity of the new growth is identified by the new sapling, and therefore it's new growth, and you can go back for war from that. This nan. If you planted it, say not for tree purposes or food purposes, but rather again, either for wood purposes or ultimately to serve as a fence, it is pata from arla. So I'll say, why is it that when you graft a young tree onto an older tree, so the young tree is batal on the older tree? And why is it ultimately, again, if you graft the young tree onto the young tree, it's not batal? Hasam, in the case of the zakena, but say by the zakena, if you change your mind about it, ultimately, again, it doesn't change identity. But say in this case over here, where the first young sapling was planted for a fence or for wood, if you change your mind about its identity and now want to utilize it as a fruit tree, ultimately, again, it regains its identity as a fruit tree and will be subject ultimately again to arla. Midi dahava alume lehen. It's no different than produce that grew on its own, or trees that grew on its own. This non alume lehen. Ultimately, again, if halacha lemaisa it grew on its own, chayavin ba'arla. Ultimately, it would be subject to our letter, so we'll have to stop over here. All right, we're fine. We're gonna be all right. Let's say so. We'll stop over. We'll pick up over here tomorrow. Again, I'm leaving you off right in the middle of the subject, still of the Kerem. We'll delve more into that tomorrow. Get into the exemptions, and then of course get into the exemptions ultimately again of marriage as well. We'll say tremendous stuff. Shkoyach.
Curious if the Rav has a source for the Philistine women becoming impregnated by multiple men. Do we have any confirmation of that besides yesterday's daf? That was what Orpah.
I believe.
So I'm just curious, was it just Orpah?
No. Take a look. I saw it made by the Maharsha by Shimshon.
Maharsha
by Shimshon. Sheikh Lifo Nisho Sehen. I'll look for it. The Gemara seems to indicate.
The Maharsha on the Gemara earlier.
Yeah, but
I looked on Google and Safari.
I remember seeing this.
The Maharsha that's better than